cue it up.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Welcome to the Lunatic Fringe. I'm Kenny.
I'm Sean.
And
our guest?
Our special guest today. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Mike Steck.
And you are with?
I'm an attorney here in Salt Lake City and have a federal firearms license, manufacturer of custom firearms, also a longtime concealed carry and tactical firearm instructor.
Right on.
We brought in the lawyer.
That's right. Just in case.
Because we're going to need it.
We always do. So today it's going to be a very special episode of Lunatic Fringe. We've actually got a really cool.
Who gets molested in that case?
It's every time there's a special episode. So we got an interesting topic to talk about today. Mike is here to talk to us about what is called NFA gun trusts.
We'll have a little Q&A, if you will.
Yeah, it's going to be a nice little round table here about what these are. I know the concept of them, but I'm unfamiliar with them in totality. As far as I am aware, let's start off with this. It's a common misnomer. It's perfectly legal to own a silencer or a machine gun, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Explain. Go ahead.
All right.
Well, tell us what the NFNA stand for.
Well, he's going to get to that. I'm sure that leads into it.
Yeah. So, yeah, it is a common misunderstanding that people have that you can't actually own suppressors, machine guns, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns. But you can actually lawfully own them, not in every state. It depends on if your state allows them. And it's somewhere around 30 states that do allow ownership of National Firearm Act items, so NFA for short.
Okay, so these things fall under these are specific items that fall under this National Firearms Act. What is that? Give us a little bit of the history of that.
Sure. So basically the idea to the NFA, there's a few statutes, and not to bore people with all of the legislation that happened. I mean, this is something that's happened since 1930, but basically it's very interesting. It was designed to curtail gangster weapons. As the statute, we'll read.
Tommy guns.
Yeah, gangster weapons. And because what was happening is the gangsters were coming in with machine guns, short barrel shotguns, short barrel rifles, and using them in commission of their crimes. Interestingly enough, pistols were actually almost included as a restricted weapon, and so it was sort of a last minute thing that pistols were not included. But had that been the case, you could have to get an NFA trust or an NFA registration just to own a pistol had pistols been included. So it is restrictive as it is, but we're grateful that pistols weren't included.
Right.
Wowza.
Now, real quick. Now, this is just folklore as far as I understand it. So put this to rest. Okay. So the NFA was signed in 19.
There's several. Basically, you've got a 1930 statute and you have a 1986 statute.
Okay. Now it's the 1931 that I'm not sure if this is a myth or not, but I was told, and so that would have been Roosevelt.
Bring on your urban legends.
Yeah, this is the urban legend I know. It would have been Roosevelt, correct?
I believe so.
Okay, so the concept was that I was told, and if this is completely false, that's cool. I'll look like the idiot. Is that the reason pistols weren't added is because Roosevelt could see how that would be a clear-cut violation of the Second Amendment. True or false?
To be honest, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, but I'm sure that was something that was contemplated at that stage in the game, was to realize that pistols were not really just something that was specific to gangster firearms.
Oh, sure.
So. But there was, so machine guns have been restricted ever since then. But the thing that affects machine guns the most was the 1986 Act, and the reason for that, the big thing on the machine guns. So there's a difference in NFA items. So for example, you could go to a company like Silencer Co., Gemtech, or even Yankee Hill Machine, and you could buy a suppressor from one of those companies. Suppressor is also referred to as a silencer.
You can also get a little thing that will attach an oil filter to the end of your firearm, like an aluminum thread converter that changes an oil filter into a suppressor, and it's disposable, but the little thread converter is the actual NFA item. How funny is that?
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to suppressors, I mean, the sky's the limit in terms of people's creativity. I mean,
oh, sure.
You'll see people who will put a potato in front of their handgun or something like that. Not that that's something anybody should ever do,
Right.
But people do that to muffle the sound. So basically, anything that's muffling the sound, the ATF is going to call a silencer or suppressor.
And that's the thing about the concept of regulatory agencies is that they have a wide latitude
Sure.
to kind of be on top of what they can consider NFA. Is that the case with the NFA Act? Does it grant the ATF wide latitude in declaring what is and what isn't a violation of?
Yeah, there are well, yes and no. I mean, there are certain things that are part of the National Firearms Act that specify the barrel length, for example. So, on a rifle, you don't want to go below a 16-inch barrel, or else that then becomes a short barrel rifle, right? And and there are some exceptions and other things that you're dealing with, and there's some very detailed technical information about certain types of pistols and whatever else. And so one of the interesting things on the classifications, you look at the Taurus Judge or even the Smith & Wesson, the Governor, now that they've just come out with, right? It's a 410 shotgun, but it's in a pistol. And people oftentimes, well, isn't that a short barrel shotgun? And you say, no, it's not, because it was never originally designed to be fired from the shoulder. So because it wasn't designed to be shot from the shoulder, it's not considered a shotgun.
But
Okay.
if you saw off the
Sure, but if you
the
take a
stock
Remington
of a shoulder-
870, even if it's in a 410, and try to create the exact same thing as the Taurus Judge, which, I mean, obviously you wouldn't be, but let's say you took a revolver style, a cylinder function shotgun, which there are, shoulder fire, and you turned it into the Taurus Judge, you would have committed a violation.
even if you come up creating the exact same thing. And that's what I've heard of in other situations is what matters is what it came off the assembly line as.
Exactly.
And then it could be you could alter it to be the exact same thing. One is legal, one is a violation in federal
Correct.
prison time.
Correct. Yeah. So you got to be very careful with that stuff. And you even have to be careful if you were to design your own AR-15, for example, because you can buy a 14.5-inch barrel, which technically is a violation of the National Firearms Act. But when you do that, you have to permanently stake on the flash hider or compensator
To take you up to the 16
so it
inches.
takes it then to 16 inches. So it either has to be silver soldered or it has to be permanently staked on. And so it's something that if you don't really know, you're not a manufacturer, you should be very careful and avoid that. So
Right.
but back to the thing on the 86 thing with on the suppressors and the machine guns thing is that after 1986, you were not able to manufacture machine guns for the civilian market ever again. So basically in 1986, they had a full-on registration of all machine guns, and that's it. So if you as a civilian want to own a machine gun, you have to own a pre-86 registered machine gun.
So it has to be
right?
grandfathered in already.
Basically, yeah.
And that's why the common misnomer amongst anti-gun people is, everybody can have an assault rifle, machine
Sure.
gun, fully automatic, or a short barrel rifle.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true, because after 1986, they're not being made. So it has to be an
Yep.
oldie but a goodie.
Yep. So they're actually still capable of being made, and they are being made. And with Joe Firearms, we will be in a position to make them, but we cannot sell them to the civilian market. Right? They have to be for government law enforcement only.
Now, can you buy it from a government agency?
No.
They
No.
will never sell them to you.
No, you can't. It's actually that if you were to buy it, that would be a violation of the National Firearms Act.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So anything that you're buying in full auto is a pre-86 registered machine gun, or drop-in parts that are registered.
Drop-in
So
autoseer.
yeah. So an autoseer, for example, certain people like the H&K platform, the MP5. And a bunch of other rifles that they have is because the lower receiver is the exact same, and you just basically just drop in the registered auto sear, and so that way you're able to shoot multiple firearms with just one registered item.
Sure.
But you're still going to pay about $15,000 for that registered sear.
One of those rare.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're out there. It just you pay a premium because it's supply and demand, and there's just no new supply that's coming out.
Now, the concept of interchanging it between weapons isn't unique. It's the same with silencers, correct?
Correct.
You are actually registering the suppressor. Sorry, not silencer. I know that
It's fine.
it's a misnomer. But
suppressor.
suppressor, you're registering the suppressor, not the handgun that goes with it. So if it's
Exactly.
a 22 caliber suppressor, it can travel from my Walther P22 to my, to something
M&P
that's-
1522.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and that's even for me. I have a 308 rifle, a bolt action rifle with a suppressor, but I have a quick detach attachment so that I can put that onto an AR-15, you don't get the same level of suppression as you do on a 223 because you've got some space there, and so it's not quite suppressing the same. But it still is another rifle that you can shoot the same suppressor on.
Huh,
Oh,
fascinating.
interesting. I did not know that would work.
Yeah, I didn't
So
know
you
that
just,
either.
You just have to go smaller and not bigger, and you have to be
Yeah.
careful because there's what's called a baffle strike, and a baffle strike is basically when your cartridge, or your bullet hits some place inside of the suppressor. You've just got to make sure that your
You're
alignments, your
aligned.
attachments, everything is aligned perfectly.
Fair enough.
Now
So-
tell us what some people may have heard the term Class 3 item.
Huh.
Like if you're going to get some
Sure.
to
They'll say class 3, class 3, class 3.
Yeah,
And-
that
and-
seems to be a popular buzzword right now.
is class 3 item. And so it's actually not a class 3 item, but it's one of the things, and it's understandable where people are getting confused is because there are several different names by which dealers are called FFLs, or Federal Firearm License Holders.
they have a Class 3 license.
And so basically you'll generally have you will have a federal firearms license holder, a gun dealer, and they will have a special class of license that then allows them to deal in NFA items. More appropriately, it should be called a Class 2 item because that is the class under which suppressors are recognized. But it's just
But automatics are a Class 3.
they actually are also under the Class 2 from my understanding.
So what's
It's
under
just
3?
Yeah, so what actually is a Class 3?
so Class 3, like I said, really just it is referring to the dealer's license.
Sure.
Huh.
Okay, and so that's the distinction. It's subtle, but people just. If you said to me Class 3, I'd say okay, fine. I understand what you're saying.
I know you mean
know,
the bad things.
Yeah, and
the
so
bad ones.
it's one of those things that I'm sure eventually will become a very hot thing that people jump on each other on the forums and this and that. And it's the Clip magazine, the Clip Nazi,
sure.
as I've heard Kenny say. But it's something that people understand. So it's more appropriate, I think, to call them NFA firearms.
Sure.
And I don't know, just being an NRA instructor, I don't like to use the word weapon, but that's what they are classified as. But
So would it be fair to say with the whole Class 2, Class 3 thing, suppressors, machine fully automatic weapons, those are Class 2 weapons, and you have to have a Class 3 license to be
That's
able to
correct.
supply them to individuals.
That's a correct statement.
Cool.
Right. So basically that's what you're looking for. So for example, an FFL, so just to show some of this is at joefirearms.com, we have a Type 7 FFL, which is a manufacturer. Okay.
Okay.
And then for us to be able to deal in NFA items, we will have to pay it what's an SOT, a special occupational tax, in order for us to sell them, to manufacture them. And so there's a lot of the regulations are overly complex in the way that they go about. So it's not something that the layman should really.
It's a good thing you've got a lawyer on staff.
Yeah, it is a good thing to have a lawyer on staff at Joe Firearms. But the other thing to talk about is that it basically. So for somebody who's interested in owning an NFA item, basically there's 3 ways that you're allowed to own an NFA item, and the first way is as an individual. Mm-hmm. Which is very common, but it becomes problematic because if you live in a location where your local law enforcement officer does not like NFA items, does not want you to have a suppressor or whatever.
Yeah, kind of like, say, not picking up names, but the chief of Springville Police.
Sure. Okay.
As opposed to the sheriff of Utah County.
Exactly, right. Here in Utah, I would be very surprised to find a law enforcement, local law enforcement officer who would not sign one for a law-abiding citizen, right? There's a background check and things like that goes on, and sure, if there was domestic violence charges pending, I'm sure they wouldn't sign it. But as an individual, you have to. I see you smirking. There are certain,
There are certain bad apples.
I'm not naming names.
No, but certainly people like the chief of Springville Police or the Utah County Sheriff.
Yeah,
he loves them. Chief of Springville Police, not a fan.
Yeah,
Not
so
a fan.
so you will find there are some locations where that's an issue, and so but basically as an individual you have to be fingerprinted, you have to get a photo, you own it basically as an individual. You're sending us forward to the ATF this application as an individual with each item that you buy with a $200 tax. So that's the first way.
That's the funny thing because back then, a $200 tax
Exactly.
stamp was put on it. That was a bigger price than now. Now that it's all inflated,
Yeah.
$200, you're like, well, that's going to be the cheap part of this whole process.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the shelf.
Yeah,
It's always
yeah,
there.
it is. It was originally designed to be a disincentive for people to own them. So you're very right in what you say, that it was meant to be prohibitive so that people would not end up buying suppressors and things like that. But that's 90 years ago or so, and not quite. Sorry, my math is off. I'm a lawyer, but that's why they just said, hey, let's make this amount. So the good thing to doing this as an individual is that it's the most common way. There's not a lot of mystery about how to do it. Most dealers are generally pretty competent in helping somebody as an individual purchase an NFA item.
You won't necessarily need an attorney to
Yeah,
jump
it's
through your hoops
exactly.
for you,
Exactly. There's not, and so that's
depending on your state.
Yeah, and so that's the good thing. The downside to that, to owning an NFA item as an individual, there's basically two things. First of all, it becomes a little bit of an issue when it comes time for you to pass these items on to your family. There is a special form that the ATF has where you're able to, if you die, to have these items go to your family members, right? Without any kind of special tax being applied again. But the issue with that is that until those things are actually done, basically, let's say I'm a grandpa now, and I die and leave this NFA item to my wife. Technically she is committing a felony until she does something with that NFA item. And the ATF does allow for reasonable time, but who's to say what reasonable means, right?
Sure.
And so it's just one of those things, and that's what you get when you look at estate planning. It's a lot of it is just about making sure your ducks are in a row and making sure that there's no headache of, oh my goodness, my husband has this and he just passed away, and what do I do with this, right?
Yeah,
And so
Then
that's one of the
where
issues.
the lawyers come in.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you're at somebody else's whim. You're at
Exactly, right?
their whim, and something could happen to you. Even you're at fate's whim as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
You could die at any moment, and I didn't put my will
Yeah,
together,
it's
or
just-
I didn't put the form together.
It's not really proper planning, right?
Sure.
And for your loved one, that's not the kind of situation you want to put them in. Planning for a funeral, those kinds of things. There's enough stress and headache going on with that. Why add more to that?
And they'll most certainly just sell it because they
They could, or
don't
send
know
and give it to
better.
your family or whatever, right? And so, and that's the thing too, right? You don't want your wife to then end up just selling this item and not knowing that she can't just sell it on the local classifieds,
and then go to federal
and
prison.
then be in trouble for that. So it's it's putting together that good plan. The other downside to owning these as an individual is that there is no other person that is authorized to have sole access to the weapon. And so what that means is, I give to you guys my suppressor and you want to take it out and go shoot it. We both just committed a felony, right? I can't have anyone else take it except for me. I have to be its sole possessor at all times. So that's where the good thing to the trust enters in, is that you are having better estate planning. You're preparing for that situation.
You just make somebody else the trustee.
Exactly. You make a trustee. You can have multiple trustees. And then from there, you are also able to have more than one person have access to it, right?
Sure.
I was just recently at a NRA legal conference in St. Louis. And the ATF was there. They were talking about trusts, and
That was put on by the NRA?
Yes.
To coincide with the expo?
Yep, with the expo.
Fair
It was the National Firearms Law Seminar.
Awesome.
It was an exceptional seminar and designed for lawyers and other professionals in the firearm legal industry. And one of the issues that was raised was whether a beneficiary can have access to the NFA firearm while the trust or the person who creates the trust is still living, right?
Okay.
So there's a little bit of a gray area in some of the trust law as it applies to, can you have your beneficiaries have access to it while you're still living? I generally say, yeah, it's probably still okay, because they're on the trust. Just make sure they have a copy of the trust. The other thing too is that you can have multiple people as the trustee. For sure, the trustee has access to the firearm. So you have more people that can have access to it. So with my brother or something, I can have him as the trustee. More than one person is on there. The second thing is that it allows for really good estate planning.
Oh, sure.
Now, let's say that you have let's say I'm your brother. I'm a trustee. You pass away, and I inherit the trust, so to speak. I inherit Class 3
Sure.
items. At that point, if I want to go ahead and list my children do you get a whole new trust, or can we hire a lawyer to augment the trust?
Sure. So actually what happens is you as the trustee, you don't get the firearm. Trustee is only a person who is in a position of stewardship, right? To make sure that the items, the property that is in the trust is administered according to the original intent of the trust.
Okay.
And so that's the trustee's job, is to just make sure that the trust is being administered.
And you can still go shoot them. It's just that the trust itself as a person owns the firearm.
Exactly, right. So, and then you're right. The trust is basically a person under the law, right? The law recognizes this piece of paper basically as an individual, just as you would see a corporation. And so when the trustor, the person who creates the trust, passes away, then those firearms then go to the beneficiaries, and they are the people who have lawful access at that position to then have complete and total access. The trustee would then be able to have access as well. It would definitely be to the trust advantage to then have the attorney review the trust, make sure everything is in order, and make sure it's still in compliance with state law.
So what's different about the way you go about setting up, or once you set up the trust, what is different about how you go about procuring firearms and purchasing them and getting their tax stamp and whatnot?
Yeah, so the thing that's different basically is that when you purchase the NFA item, you basically buy it as the trust. All right,
Okay.
You have to put money into a trust account, and then you buy it from that trust account.
From the trust checking account.
Yep, exactly. And your local bank can help you set that up. And that's the thing that's different. And then the other thing is that there are no fingerprints required and no picture. And most importantly, there is no law enforcement signature required. And so as we were talking before, if you live in a location where the local law enforcement, they're not going to sign off, doing the trust is going to be a very smart thing to do,
because the trust doesn't live anywhere necessarily, so they don't have a local...
Exactly, right. It's an entity under the state law, basically. It's not anything that the county really regulates, the city. It's something that's under state law.
And it goes state by state in that case. Now,
Correct.
do different states... Do they have different rules about trusts, and they
Yes,
have different rules
yep,
specifically about NSA trusts?
NFA, yeah. So some states do have some very particular laws when it comes to trusts, and that's why a very big caution here is to never just download or go create your own trust, just something off of the internet, do it yourself, whatever. This is not something you want to screw up, right?
Right, because there's money in that.
Well, there's money in that. I mean, there's a couple things. First of all, you could right now you're looking at about 6 months to get your NFA item. You're waiting 6 months for the NFA branch back in West Virginia to run it through.
It would be in West Virginia.
Yeah, where most ATF things are located. And so you're there, and they're not even going to read your trust for 6 months. And so you've done something, do it yourself. Believe me, you're going to be pretty anxious to get your NFA item by the time 6 months rolls around. You've paid your money 6 months ago, and then to find out 6 months later, hey, this, do it yourself, downloaded, quicken,
didn't quite work.
Is not appropriate. You've got to be very careful. So proper planning in advance is very crucial.
Can I register my trust in a different state?
You can, but you have to. It's best to consult an attorney.
That's what you do.
It's best to just make sure that you don't have any provisions that are in there that are, that violate state law. And so that actually becomes another issue of with your NFA item. You can't just willy-nilly take your NFA items across state lines.
Oh, really?
Right? So even, here in Utah, I can have a suppressor. And Wyoming, I can have a suppressor up there too. Or let's add a machine gun. I'm not going to go across state lines unless I tell the ATF, right? There's a special form.
They need to know.
Mm-hmm. You have to tell the ATF, say, I'm going to be traveling across state lines, or I'm moving, let them know, and they just they want you to make sure that your NFA item is not prohibited in the state that you're traveling to. So I'm not going to, I could fill out the form, but I'm not going to take it to California, right? So,
right.
That's cleared.
Yeah. Well, and they're not going to necessarily clear up. It's the responsibility is upon you to know. I mean, this is a whole new area of law that a lot of people are not really sure about. And so it becomes an issue of traveling across state lines with your NFA.
How long
items.
have people been doing an NFA trust? Is this something new?
No, it's something that's been going on for a long time, and people have been doing it. It's just that with the increased interest in firearms, more and more people are saying, "Hey, this is cool." I mean, even just shooting a suppressor, I mean, gosh, it's just hearing protection. A lot of guys now are really into the long range shooting, 1,000-yard shooting, and they're picking up 338 Lapua and they're shooting 50 BMG, and those are big guns, and they have a lot of boom, and shooting that thing all day long, it takes a toll, even with ear protection. And so putting on a suppressor is kind of the way to go,
Sure.
just for shooting and being more enjoyable. And so that's a lot of the reason why. I mean, it's become, maybe it's the Hollywood, maybe it's the gun stuff, that expanded in the last few years, but people just see, hey, this has a really neat place for the shooting community, and also there's a novelty factor, right?
Oh, yeah.
I have this and you don't,
Yeah.
and wow, that's some nice eye candy.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
well, and it's billed actually in its marketing in Europe and in the past in the U.S. as a safety item.
It is.
So
it's just very expensive hearing protection. A suppressor is. I mean, and it is neat to shoot. And so, I mean, and there's a lot of things that are fun to shoot about it. And so, it's not really Hollywood quiet, but it is fun to shoot
sure.
a suppressor. And there's a lot of other sporting purposes. And you're out in the desert or something, or you're in cabin country and you don't want to be a nuisance to other people. Having that suppressor, I mean, as you mentioned in Europe, you're actually required to hunt with the suppressor. I mean, good luck
Interesting.
getting your firearm, but once you do, they require. I mean, you can buy suppressors dime a dozen anywhere you go. I mean,
It's not a very complex or expensive
No.
piece of equipment.
No, it's
anyway,
not.
It's not that complex.
it's basically just a tube with several chambers inside of it. It's just like what's on your car. It's a muffler,
Yeah.
just like on your car. Several individual chambers that are inside of this can.
that baffle around.
Yep, they're
the
called
sound
baffles.
waves.
Yep.
So you said there were 3 methods.
Yep. The third
What's
way
the
is,
third
is
way?
owning through a corporation. So if you
Man. Sorry, every time I hear the word corporation, I've been bred to be like, man.
a corporation, the same thing. No law enforcement signature, no fingerprints. The downside to that is you don't have the good estate planning set up already, unless you have an attorney set up your corporation in a way that helps designate how corporate property is supposed to be dealt with upon the death of a partner. You can have multiple people have access to it. So if you have business partners on the LLC, something still that you're likely going to be going to an attorney for anyway.
But you can also make the LLC. You can make the partners of it anonymous.
Yeah, you can. And
Can you do that for the trust?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's just you're going to send in anonymous is yes and no. I mean,
I can be invisible.
yeah.
That's what I want. Invisible in the eyes of the law.
Yeah, good luck on that one. You have a Social Security, you're pretty much screwed.
I burned that, man.
You burned it,
Man.
Yeah.
Man.
I'm
Mark
sure
of the
that
beast.
I'm sure that made it disappear. I'm sure you're gone in the eyes of the government.
I have no credit score. That's not by my design. It's just by poor planning.
That's by poor decision making.
I wouldn't loan you money anyway.
Exactly. See?
So
Bank said.
yeah. There's I mean sure, if you want to be a little bit on the spooky side and say how can I hide myself corporation within a corporation and off-seas accounts and stuff like that,
yes.
I'm happy to take on that legal work.
That sounds like fun.
So
Making a veritable maze.
Yeah.
Of corporations
Exactly.
in Barbados, in
it's-
Switzerland,
he's creating Inception.
Trinidad and Tobago.
It's like Inception only with corporations just to hide a suppressor.
One single item.
So you would say that out of these the three things, the best course of action for an individual would be an NFA trust.
Yeah, I'd say so. And I mean, full disclosure, right? That's a practice area that I do, right?
Sure.
That's something I do and people pay me to do. So of
Right.
course I'm going to say that. But I do believe that because, like I said, the estate planning and multiple people on the item, right? Because that's something that would be fun is just to be able to give it out to a brother or somebody else that you trust and have them go out and be able to shoot it as well. So, and that peace of mind, because man, I'll tell you what, when I brought home my suppressor before I knew of these things and came home with my suppressor and I told my wife, I said, this ATF document with this tax stamp, you always have to keep it with the suppressor.
Yeah.
I said, you are never to touch this thing, never take it out of the house, and never to do, I gave her the whole litany of the
Whole
things that you're
spiel.
not supposed to do. And she said, why did you buy this thing that's in our, brought this thing into our house that's so restricted? And
It makes me afraid.
yeah, it makes me afraid. But had I set it up the right way and had her on there, it wouldn't even be an issue, right?
Right.
So it's better for your family, and it's a one-time deal. You're going to pay somewhere between $400 to $600 depending upon your location. to get an NFA trust done. It is a little bit different from a regular full-on trust, and you've also got to be careful that you don't make adjustments to it without consulting an attorney. You just got to be.
You've got the know-how already. You've got this sort of set up ahead of time.
Exactly.
You know what you're doing, and for you, it's boilerplate. For you, setting up an NFA trust.
Yep.
The person just needs to feed you a little bit of information. You connect the dots, and
The biggest thing that I do with my clients when they come in and they're looking for an NFA trust is it's in education. It really is. It's as if I was billing at my hourly rate anyway, because it turns into 2 to 3 hours worth of work of just education on, okay, they're asking questions and they're getting personal attention, and they always have access back to me to say, hey, I have this question. And I had a guy just barely, a previous client, say, hey, I'm doing this short barrel rifle. What can I do about this? And here's the issue that I didn't anticipate. And I was able to give him an answer. I'm happy to take care of my clients after I've done the trust for them and give them just that answer. So you're right. The trust language, the trust that people get is the same trust I have for myself. It's in that education. Basically, you're paying for the time to sit down with your attorney and go over your specific situation and have me guide you through and make sure that what you're doing is okay by the law.
Right.
So that's really what you're paying for.
I can do that on the internet.
Yeah, yeah.
The armchair commandos will help you out, but you will be coming to me paying a lot more money to have it fixed later.
Exactly.
Because I'll be in court and in shackles.
I'm happy to help you out.
What run-ins with the courts have NFA issues had?
So really, it's the criminals, right? Well, and I say the criminals, and that could
It's
be
always
any
the
of
criminals.
us. It could be us, right?
It is
Well, when we're
us.
dealing with, it's true, because when we're dealing with statutory administrative law, any one of us could be the criminal because we just don't know how it works.
To my understanding, there are not a lot of NFA. So somebody sets up an NFA trust, they're lawfully following what they're supposed to, and then they get in trouble. There's not a lot of that.
Right.
Okay.
Because they had an attorney tell them what was right.
That, or they're generally educating themselves on those kinds of things. So you don't see a lot of cases where somebody's in trouble.
Or they're acting in good faith.
Yeah, they're acting in faith. The ATF will give a warning. They might confiscate the item or whatever, right? It's the good guy defense that it never really makes it that far.
Right.
The big thing that the NFA is really something that federal prosecutors especially love to slap at people and say, oh, by the way, this guy who just committed this bank robbery, he also had a sawed-off shotgun. He had this violation.
That's the one they always get him on, at Ruby Ridge or anywhere. It's because it's so easy to make. It's just a sawing motion.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, I actually do criminal law, so they're my clients as well. But you don't get a lot of advantage out of a short barrel shotgun, really. Anyway, I mean, it is more maneuverable, and that's the thing. You're getting more maneuverability, and it actually spreads the shot a lot quicker. And so I don't know. It's one of those things. But
so I've got a 21-inch barrel.
Yeah.
I've got a super long one.
Yeah. So. Anyway, we could talk about all the things that criminals do wrong, and that we could say, well, you should do this and avoid that problem, like use a revolver instead of a semi-automatic, because the cartridges you don't lose the casings. They're going to stay right there.
And, I've watched CSI.
So go with the revolver if you plan on a crime. So that's generally the NFA.
As your attorney, I advise you to use a revolver in any crimes you commit.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. I'm not advising anyone to commit crimes. It's just funny. So that's generally the NFA, and it's a fun thing to have. Machine guns are fun to do, and the suppressors of short barrel rifles, very fun, very neat things to do. A very popular thing you're seeing people doing that like to get high end firearms. They'll go with an AR-15, put it into 9mm with the short barrel rifle and a suppressor. So basically they're $400 into the tax stamps, but that's a fun rifle to shoot with the short barrel rifle and 9mm, just plink all day long. You want to talk about a fun plinker, take off your ears and you're just plink, 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 plink.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And of course you didn't mention the automatics there, because those are more prohibitively expensive just because you have to get a grandfathered one.
Sure, pre-1986.
So guys like FBS Russia, this guy online that does this crazy stuff, and he somehow has a mounted machine gun.
Yep.
He also had access, I don't know how, to a 40mm autocannon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
know.
registered as a destructive device, and that's something else we didn't quite talk about are the destructive devices. But that's something else that's regulated by the National Firearms Act. Things like grenade launchers, and that's a whole nother conversation in and of itself. And it's not something that your average everyday Joe
They're harder
is,
to get a hold of.
Yeah,
we'll
they're
just
much
say.
harder. Yeah, he's likely has a connection with somebody, has lots
Like
of
law
money or
enforcement.
something like that. Yeah, but I mean, you can own Browning 50 caliber machine guns. I mean, if you look on YouTube at the machine gun shoots and stuff like that all over, that's what these guys have. Is I mean, they've got 30 cals, they've got 1919s, 50 cals, 30 caliber machine guns.
Modus.
Yeah, the Modus. Oh, I get chills thinking about that rifle, that machine gun after my time in the Army. But so those they are out there, and you can get them. And the guys on Red Jacket and stuff. I mean, that's what they're doing. And so the cool thing, and so part of the reason, in addition to us wanting to sell to law enforcement and police, but one of the neat things about us as a Type 7 FFL, and then we make the full auto, is we then get to shoot those as well, right?
Ah.
Yeah.
So it's actually kind of this unspoken thing, and you still have to. I mean, you have to be careful with what you do, but we're in the business of selling firearms. But it's an added perk for us
Sure.
once we have full auto and dealer samples, and I'm looking at the dealer, sample prices and stuff for us to get, suppressors, and it's very enticing, and
Right.
It's
so
worth it.
yeah, it makes it fun, and so knowing a good dealer and being and knowing them and saying, hey, dealer samples, and that's how your gun ranges are able to do full auto, the full auto shoots that they're advertising, because they oftentimes have purchased those NFA items, in outright, $15,000 things, but some of them are manufacturing as well, and that's how they're able to do dealer samples, basically, to let you come in and shoot those. So,
There is a fourth way to get access to these items: is get elected sheriff.
exactly.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
That's-
And you can do anything.
And it might cost you the same amount as buying a
Yeah.
grandfathered-in machine gun to
Then
actually
you'll
get
be
To pay off,
But-
to pay off the public officials.
exactly. But then you'll be sheriff.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Mike, thanks very much
Yeah.
for joining us. This has been awesome. Where can people see or get a hold of you? What websites or phone numbers or anything
Yeah,
that you have
sure.
to plug?
Appreciate that. Yeah, so I've got two things for my NFA stuff. I've got Gun Blog, and that's BLAWG, so a law blog, gunblog.com, and I also have stecklaw.com, and that's where my law firm and all my practice areas and stuff are up there. And my email is michael@stecklaw.com.
Awesome. Well, I think that'll do it for this episode of Lunatic Fringe.
It's been
We're
very
going to
informative.
absolutely, and we're going to have you back so that we can talk about the destructive devices,
Yeah, let's talk about it.
AOWs, because I do have some more questions regarding short-barreled shotguns and stuff like that. But we'll save that for another time.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Absolutely. But in the meantime, I'm Kenny,
I'm Sean.
and we are Lunatic Fringe.